Hi there, it's Tracy from So Fun for Kids. I'm here to show you how to make your pyjamas. So I'll show you what's in the kit first. So you'll have one of these cute pictures, either a cat or a dog, and a piece of Liza Fix that's the same size. You'll also have a rectangle of flannelette with a piece of Liza Fix the same size. You'll have a piece of fusible interfacing, some elastic and some bias binding. You'll have two pieces of flannelette for the cuffs on the pants. The two big pieces, which are the legs of the pants. And you'll also have a t-shirt. Okay, for the first step, we're going to take one of the legs of the pyjama pants and one of the cuffs. Now you can see this is how they line up together. So I've got it lined up, and now I'm just going to flip that onto the pyjama legs like this. And I'm going to line up that bottom edge together. So make sure the edges meet nicely. So you'll see that the right sides of my fabric are facing together and the wrong side of the cuff will be facing up. And I'm just going to start by pinning along that bottom edge. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, I'm going to sew a straight stitch across the bottom. Then I'm going to sew a zigzag stitch right along the very edge of the fabric to stop any fraying when we wash our pyjamas. I'll come back when I've sewn that and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've just been to my sewing machine, and along the edge I've sewn a straight stitch 1 centimetre from the edge, and then I've done a zigzag stitch right on the very edge of the fabric. It's alright if the zigzag stitch goes off the edge a little bit. What we want to do is to seal this edge of the fabric so it doesn't fray. I set my zigzag so that the width was 5 and the length was 1, so that the zigzag is fairly wide and close together. So once I've done that, I can open out the cuff on my pyjama pants like this. And I'm just going to push it nice and flat like this. Now we've got some bias binding in our kit, and we're going to use that to make a feature along the cuff. So I'm going to line that up over the join on the pyjama leg, and I'm going to sew that into place. So first I'm going to pin the bias binding down. Now if you have a sewing machine that has a fancy stitch or different decorative stitches that you can use, you can sew this on with a decorative stitch, or if you don't have that, you could do a few lines of straight stitching or even a zigzag stitch to make a bit of a feature. Okay, so you can see where I've pinned on my bias binding. So I'm going to go and sew that on now with some fancy stitching. I'll just show you too on the back before I sew this. I've made sure that my seam is all facing in one direction as I've pinned on the binding, so that it will all sit nice and flat going one way when I sew it. I've just sewn on that bias binding on my sewing machine. So I have used a fancy stitch to sew that on. So now I'm just going to get my scissors and cut off any extra little bits hanging off the edges. Okay, and I've actually gone ahead and done the same with the other leg, so I'll trim those off as well. So after you've got both of your legs with the cuffs and the bias binding sewn on, you're going to take one of the legs and fold it in half so that these two long edges meet up together. And what we're going to do is pin those together. Okay, it's a good idea to get our bias binding to match up there. Put a pin there. And if we put a pin at this top bit as well, and then we can line up the edges and pin the remaining part in between. Okay, so I have pinned that whole long length from the cuff right up to the top there, one straight edge. And I'm now going to sew that with a straight stitch at 1 centimetre, and then I'm going to zigzag the edge again. Okay, so I have sewn together the inside leg seam on both of the legs now. I've turned one through the right way and I have the other one inside out. Now what I'm going to do is to take the one that's turned the right way and place it inside the one that's turned inside out. And pull it right down inside, keeping that inside leg seam together. And then I'm lining up the curved edge at the top here for each piece. So you'll see that our right sides are touching each other. They're inside where we can't see them now. And what we're going to do is pin this curved edge that goes, sorry, I'll just lift the camera up a bit. This curved edge that goes from here all the way around to here. So if we pin first where the seam meets, then we'll pin this end together. And we'll pin the other end together. And then we're going to finish pinning the rest of the way. So as I'm pinning, I'm making sure the edges of the fabric are right together. Everything's lined up nicely. Okay, so I have pinned here, around here, down to this end. Now I'm going to go and sew this on my machine again, first with a straight stitch, then with a zigzag on the very edge. Okay, so I have sewn that seam now, and that has joined the two legs of the pajama pants together. So now I can pull that inside leg out and I have the start of a pair of pants like this. So the next thing I want to do is work on the waistband. So I'm actually going to take this to my ironing board now. We're going to turn over a small single hem to start with. I'm at my ironing board now, and what I'm going to do is, I've got my pants. I'm going to get the waist of the pants and loop it over the end of the ironing board. I'm going to turn over the top of the waist about 1/2 centimetre, and then I'm going to iron it down. I'm going to work my way around, all the way around the waist of the pajamas, turning it over 1/2 centimetre and ironing it down. I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to fold it over with a bigger hem of about 3 centimetres, and we're going to iron that down. And I'm going to work my way all the way around again with 3 centimetres. This is to make a channel that our elastic is then going to sit inside. Now that I've ironed under a 1/2 centimetre hem and then a 3 centimetre hem, I'm going to pin that in place all the way around the top of the pajamas. It's a good idea to use a tape measure when you're ironing that hem under, just to make sure that you get it nice and even. So just pinning that all the way around. Now, at the back seam of the pajamas, we can tell which is the back because this part is longer. This seam is longer on the back to the front. So on the back, we need to leave an opening where we're going to insert the elastic. So what I usually do to remind myself where the opening is going to be is put a pin either side of the opening. So we want the opening to be about 5 centimetres. And these pins are to remind me not to sew between these pins. So I'll start sewing here. I'll go all the way around until I get to this pin here, and then I'll stop sewing. I need to make sure I secure it with a forward-backward stitch at both of these spots. So I'm going to start with forward-backward, and then sew all the way around the loop until I get to the pin that's reminding me to stop to leave an opening. This time we don't need to do a zigzag stitch, we've got a nice folded edge here. the beginning now. Stitch there, and I can take that out now and cut my threads. So when we're sewing the waistband, we need to take off this front part of the machine so that we can loop the waist around this part of the machine. Okay, so I'll just get my pajamas. I'll find the bit where I'm going to leave the gap, so that will tell me where I'm going to start. So I'm going to loop it right around the machine so I don't accidentally sew the top of the pants together. And we're going to be sewing close to this side. So close to that, the inside part of this hem. So I'm just lining up the edge of my presser foot with this edge, and I'm going to follow that edge around as I sew around the top of the pajama pants. So I'm going to start with forwards, backwards, and then sew all the way around the loop until I get to the pin that's reminding me to stop to leave an opening. This time we don't need to do a zigzag stitch, we've got a nice folded edge here. Back at the beginning now. Backward stitch there, and I can take that out now and cut my threads. Okay, so I've sewn around the waistband now with a straight stitch, and I've got my opening here that I left open. I've put a safety pin on my piece of elastic, and I'm going to use that to help me thread my elastic into the waist. So I take my safety pin, pop it into that hole, and start to run it down one side of the tunnel that we've made. What I can do with my safety pin now is hold it with my right hand, push some fabric onto it, and then hold it with my left hand and pull the fabric along. Bunch it up, holding it with my right hand, hold it with my left hand and pull it along. And the elastic will start moving along through the tunnel. Holding the pin with my right hand, pushing it onto the pin, holding the left side of the pin and pulling it off. Bunching it on, pulling it off, bunching it on, pulling it off. Now I usually like, after I've threaded the elastic through, I like to hold the elastic together with a safety pin and then go and try my pajamas on and make sure they feel really comfortable. You don't want them to be too tight or too loose. It's really important that pajamas are super comfy. When you've got them on, you can pull the elastic in tighter if you need to and move the pin, or you can let them out looser and move the pin to the right spot so that they're just right for you. Okay, so I'm back to that hole. So I pull that pin back out through the hole. Try and make sure that your elastic is not twisted in any spot. It's quite wide. You want it to sit nice and flat inside the tunnel. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure the elastic's pulled right in. I'm going to pin the elastic together. Now I'm going to go and try them on and get the elastic to just the right length for me. While you've got them on, you might also like to check out how the length is and think about how big you want the hem on the bottom to be. So while you've got them on, you could just turn the ends up and put a pin in to show you how long you want them to be. Because after we finish the waistband, we are going to be working on these hems. Okay, so I've tried them on. I have worked out how tight I want the elastic, so they feel perfect for me now. I also put a pin into my hem where I think I want the hem to end up. But first I'm going to just pull the elastic out a bit, and where this safety pin is, I'm going to sew. I usually sew a few times across and back just to make sure this is nice and secure. So I'll go and do that now, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've sewn that elastic together now, and I just cut off the extra bit of elastic so it's not too bulky. Now I can pull that elastic inside that tunnel. I'm going to pin that hole closed, but I'm also going to add a little bit of bias binding. So I've just got a bit that I folded in half. I'm going to use this as a tag. When you make your own pajamas, sometimes if I haven't made a tag, it can be really confusing which is the front and back of your pajamas when you're getting dressed. So this just makes it a lot easier, so you know immediately where the back is. So fold it in half, put the little rough edges underneath that hem, and then pin it in place. And I'm just going to sew the hole closed, just that small section there, with a straight stitch now. Okay, so I've sewn the hole closed, I've got my little tag in. So the last job with these pants is to hem the bottom of the legs. So I worked out that I wanted my hem to be about 2 centimeters long. So I went to my iron again, and first I ironed up a hem of about 1 centimeter all the way around each leg. And then I folded it over again another centimetre all the way around. So now I'm just going to pin the hem in place, and then I'm going to go and sew that on my sewing machine. I want to sew closer to this top edge than the bottom edge so that it doesn't flap around. I want it to be sewn up here. So I'll go and do that now. So I've sewn my hems in place now at the bottom. I've turned my pants through the right way, and my pants are finished and ready to go. Very exciting, I can't wait to wear them. So it's time to start on my t-shirt now. The first thing I want to do is work with my little picture and the little square of Fix I have. Now Fix is a special paper that we can use to help glue something onto another piece of fabric. It has a rough side and a smooth side. The rough side has a glue on it. So we want the rough side to be facing up, and then we're going to line up our little picture exactly on top of that Fix. Now, it's really important we don't get the Fix on the iron because it will get very gunky and melt onto the iron. So it's a good idea to cover what we're going to iron with a little piece of fabric or a handkerchief, something like that. Then we can get our iron, and we're just going to iron it. Give it a good iron. Probably for about a minute. And the heat is going to melt the glue and join our picture to that paper. So they're joined now. what I can do now is I just am going to peel the paper off, and you'll be able to feel that the fabric feels a bit different now. It feels a lot smoother. Sorry, I have a growling cat. Okay, so now we're going to peel the paper off the back of the fabric, and you'll be able to feel that the glue has transferred to the back of the fabric. It feels a lot smoother now. We peel that right off. And now we can glue this piece to another piece. So we've got our flannelette fabric here. I'm going to put it right on the center. I'm going to cover it with some fabric again, and I'm going to iron on the top. And our little picture is going to glue onto the flannelette fabric. So now it's attached. Now we've got another piece of Blyser-Fix that's the same size as this flannelette fabric. So make sure the rough side is facing up with the glue. Line up my flannelette fabric on top. Put another piece of fabric over it, and I'm going to iron that on top. So now the paper is stuck on, and I can peel that off the back. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a zigzag stitch to sew around this little picture of the dog. Because this is a raw edge, if we don't do some sewing on it, it's going to fray, especially when we wash it. So the zigzag is going to help seal that edge. I'm going to set my zigzag to a width of 5 and a length of 1. And I'm going to make sure each stitch is on both this fabric and the flannelette all the way around. So I'll go and sew that and I'll come back. I have sewn my picture onto the flannelette fabric now with a zigzag stitch right around the little picture. Now I'm going to iron this onto my t-shirt. So I've got my t-shirt here, and I'm going to find the center of the t-shirt where I want the picture to go. Once I've got it lined up, I'll put some fabric over the top of it again, and I'll iron this onto my t-shirt. Okay, now sewing on knit fabric can be a little bit tricky, so we've got a little trick we're going to use to help stabilize the fabric and make it easier to sew this on nicely. So in your kit you also have a piece of fusible interfacing. So this also has glue, so on one side it has glue and it is a bit shiny. What we're going to do is put this inside the t-shirt with the shiny side up underneath our picture. So I'm just going to, I've cut it bigger than the picture so that it's a bit easier to line up. Okay, so once I'm happy that I can see my rectangle is here around my picture, double check that I've got the shiny side facing up, which is the gluey side. I'll cover it up again and I'm going to iron that into place. Okay, so I think my interfacing's nice and secure now inside there. Now I can take this to my sewing machine and sew this on again with a zigzag stitch around the edge. Now it's always a little bit tricky sewing something onto a completed garment. Often when we add a decoration, we do it before we sew the garment together. We're using a pre-bought t-shirt, so it's sewn together, so we have to just work around that. So I've still got the front of my machine taken off, so I can loop my t-shirt onto the machine. So I'll just thread this under until I can get to where I'm working on. Now, I just have to be sure as I'm sewing this that I've always got the other parts of the t-shirt out of the way, that they're not going to get folded over and sewn up in a strange way. We want this panel to be flat when we're sewing it, so that everything sits the way it's supposed to sit. So I'm just putting the foot down and I'm going to start on one edge. I'm just constantly checking that everything's sitting nice and flat, the way that it's supposed to. When I'm at the corner, I'm just going to make sure that my needle's on the outside position before I turn. I've got the needle down and now I can lift the presser foot and swivel the t-shirt round. Put my presser foot down and keep going up the other side. So again, just making sure that all my t-shirt is looped around the machine and not getting caught up anywhere in my sewing. So needle down on the outside, lift the presser foot and turn. So it does get a little bit tricky trying to work out where to put all of this t-shirt, but you just take your time and make sure that everything's in place before you start sewing. And that was the final step of our t-shirt, and now we have a super cute pair of PJs to wear. Enjoy!